So you're thinking about getting into podcasting. Obviously you have, otherwise you wouldn't be here. You've been a fan of and listened to podcasts and thought to yourself, I could do that. Of course you can, and I'm here to help you. This is How to Start a Podcast, a guide for beginners. My name is Miguel, and I'm a podcaster, producer, and consultant at Hella Good Creative. Over the next hour or so, I'll take you through the process of creating a podcast from start to finish. Whether you're just starting to consider podcasting or you're ready to launch your own show, this series will provide you with the tools and the knowledge you need to succeed. Because this is for beginners, I'll be covering the basics of podcasting and won't be getting into the technical aspects of the recording and editing processes, but I will provide you with resources and tips that will help you to get started. I'll also be sharing my own lessons learned as a podcaster to help you to avoid common pitfalls and to set yourself up for success. By the end, you'll have a solid understanding of the key elements of starting a podcast and be ready to launch your own show. So let's get started. Now that you've decided to start a podcast, your next step is to decide the type of show you want to produce. There are several different formats to choose from, and making this choice early on will help to guide your planning process. Let's start by taking a look at the solo podcast option. This is a podcast with one host, who presents the topic for each episode. This is one of the easiest formats to start with because you just need a microphone and expertise in a particular field. But it can be a challenge for you as the host, since you'll be talking alone for each episode. You'll need to be able to provide enough content and be engaging enough to keep an audience interested. When you're doing a show by yourself, you'll be more efficient in terms of production since you don't need to coordinate with any guests, and you also have complete control over the content and format. But the downside to this is, solo podcasts may lack the variety and diversity of perspectives that interviews or co-hosted shows have. And they can also be more difficult to produce consistently without the support of other people. Also, you have to be able to hold an audience's attention all by yourself, and that can be difficult for some people. Which brings us to our next show type, the co-hosted option. This is a show with two or more hosts, and a lot of times, each host will play a specific role. For example, one host may read news snippets while the other leads a roundup segment. If you're doing this type of podcast, keep in mind that you'll need more coordination and communication between you and your co-host. Unlike a solo podcast, there will be a lot more editing and post-production work than when you're recording with just one person, which we'll get into in a later video. But at the same time, co-hosted podcasts can be more engaging for listeners, and it gives you a support and accountability system. Is this style the right choice for you? If you're willing to work with a team or at least one other person to share the workload, this is a solid choice. Another popular format is the interview style podcast. If you're thinking about doing an interview style podcast, it's important to keep in mind that this format requires a lot more preparation and coordination with people outside your team because you'll need to schedule and plan with your guests in advance. Also, the conversation may be less predictable than a solo show because you won't have complete control over its direction. Like I mentioned with the co-hosted podcast, editing and post-production will need a little more work since you may need to cut out awkward silences, off-topic tangents in the conversation, or just some regular old stumbles. However, interviews can provide a more engaging listening experience for your audience. In the end, whether an interview-style podcast is the right choice for you will depend on your goals and resources. The last format I'm going to talk about is the storytelling podcast. This type of podcast tells a story over several episodes. The story can either be nonfiction, like a true crime podcast detailing a complex case, or something completely fictional where characters adventure through a long plot line. It may use a narrative format similar to an audiobook or a dialogue-heavy format like a role-playing game. Storytelling podcasts can be highly engaging and immersive for listeners because they offer a compelling narrative that unfolds over time. They can also evoke strong emotions and create a deep connection with the audience. This type of podcast can be a good way to showcase your creative writing or storytelling skills, and to differentiate your show from other types of podcasts. The downside to this, though, is storytelling podcasts can require a lot of preparation and planning because you need to develop a cohesive story arc and ensure that each episode builds on the previous one. They can also be less flexible in terms of content and format since you'll need to maintain continuity across multiple episodes. So how do you decide which format to go with? Let's recap the options and look at the pros and cons to help you decide which option is best for you. Solo podcasts can be more efficient to produce since you don't need to coordinate with any guests or interviewees. Although they could be less appealing to some listeners, as they may prefer the variety and interaction of an interview-style show. Co-hosted podcasts can provide support and accountability for the hosts, as you can share the workload and responsibility for the show. But they may be less flexible in terms of content and format, since you need to consider the interests and perspectives of multiple people. Interview podcasts can provide a more engaging listening experience for your audience. This format is among the most popular because it relies on the guests rather than the hosts to provide the content. The downside is the conversation can be less predictable with less control over its direction. Storytelling podcasts can be especially engaging for podcast listeners who want to know what happens next. They also require a lot of preparation and planning, and you need to maintain continuity across multiple episodes. Whatever you decide to do, just remember that there is no wrong choice. Whatever you feel is best for you is the correct one. Now that you've come up with the structure and format of your show, it's time to choose a topic or theme to focus on. Will your show be comedic in nature or more serious? Will it cover current events and pop culture, or will it be a group discussion among friends? Will you be interviewing guests on your show? Deciding this early on will help you to create your content and ensure that each episode has a clear purpose and direction. When you're deciding on a topic, think about things that you're passionate about or have expertise in. This will help you to give quality and engaging content to your listeners. At the same time, you should think about who it is you're trying to reach. Who's your intended audience? Who's the person that you hope will listen to your show? Okay, what I want you to do now is to create a persona of who it is that will be listening to this show. Try to visualize who this person is. What type of content do you think they might be interested in? There are a few different ways to approach this, but the first thing I would suggest is to do some online searches. Look at websites, social media groups, forums, anything that's related to your potential topic to see what type of content already exists and how people are responding to it. You can also use your existing social media accounts just to ask your followers what they would like to hear on a podcast. Ask your friends and family what they would be interested in listening to. Take advantage of the resources that you already have at your disposal. At this point, you should come up with a list of 5 to 10 topics that excites you. Then narrow it down to the one that you feel most passionate about so you don't lose interest and experience pod fade after just a handful of episodes. A podcast requires a consistent stream of content, so choose something that you can discuss at length and has enough material to sustain multiple episodes. A lot of people think certain topics are oversaturated and we don't need another show about whatever. It's okay to cover topics that have been discussed before, but you should try to find a unique angle or perspective that sets your podcast apart from others in the same space. For example, instead of doing a podcast that just does a recap of a television show, you can do a rundown of the outfits worn in each episode. On the other hand, you could choose to speak to a topic that is underserved. While pop culture and true crime are extremely popular right now, you may find success in a less crowded space like education. For reference, here are the top 10 podcast genres provided by Edison Research. As you can see, there's several places for you to get in where you fit in if you can find something to talk about at length and not get tired of it. Keeping people engaged is how you'll keep your audience coming back for more. Once you have a few topics in mind, you can run them by your friends and family for feedback to see which ones create the most interest. This can help you to refine your ideas and choose the best topic for your podcast. Choosing a name for your show can be difficult, so here's a couple tips to help you brainstorm. Just like when you were coming up with your show format, you should put together a list of names that you have in mind for your show. You'll want to have multiple options for a name just in case the one that you choose is already being used by someone else. Try to keep the name simple. Your show name gives the listener an indication of what the show is about. For example, if you're doing a show about music, then you probably don't want to go with Burrito Time. There are exceptions to this rule, though. A random show name may work if you've already established a brand or if you can make sure that the audience knows the backstory or inside joke with the name. Otherwise, there's a chance that new listeners won't get the cleverness of the name if it doesn't relate to the topic. Make sure that your potential titles are catchy and attention-grabbing, but easy to spell and pronounce. Best podcast promotion comes through recommendations and word of mouth, so you don't want to confuse your audience right off the bat. This can lead to mispronunciations and make it difficult for your audience to recommend your podcast to other people. So try to keep it simple, but memorable. A name that's easy to remember and spell will make it easier for your listeners to find and share your podcast. Make it relevant to your content. Your podcast name should give listeners an idea of what the show is about. So consider incorporating some keywords related to your topic. Once you've settled on a short list of names, a good way to find out if it will go over well with an audience is to run it past your friends and family again. They're an important group for you to bounce ideas off of because hopefully you'll get honest opinions from them and like-minded people in your circle before you're sharing it with the world. The next thing you should do is a Google search. You don't want to spend too much time coming up with branding and marketing for something you won't be able to use because someone else already has it. Make sure to avoid copyright issues. After checking that the name that you chose isn't already in use by someone else, avoid using trademark terms or phrases unless you have permission. Consider your branding. Your podcast name should align with your overall branding and the image that you want to convey. By using these tips, you can choose a strong, memorable name for your podcast that reflects your content and your brand. There's a lot that goes into choosing a good name, and while it may be time-consuming, keep in mind that this is something you'll need to be comfortable with saying and seeing more than anyone else. So choose wisely. So you've decided on a name and format. Now it's time to plan your content. Planning your content, the first thing that you should do is to research your topic. For my show, They Reminisce Over You. Once we've decided on the episode topic, we find all the relevant information that we can about the subject. I usually start with random thoughts and facts that I already know, and then do some fact checking to confirm what I knew. This usually leads to me looking up information on news websites, Wikipedia, media such as movies, TV shows, albums, and then saving any relevant info that I think would be entertaining to share with our listeners. I search for any interviews that the person may have done because in most cases, the best information you can get is when it comes straight from the horse's mouth. Listen, I know we're living in an era of misinformation and facts not mattering, but giving your listeners truthful and factual information is very important. Even if your show is discussing the weekly happenings in pop culture or a review show discussing last night's episode of whatever, fact-checking helps build credibility and trust with your listeners. To improve the flow of your podcast episodes and avoid wandering off topic, it's a good idea to create an outline of the information that you gathered during the research. This is especially important for new podcasters who may be tempted to just wing it and try to freestyle their way through their episodes. Although it may seem like an easy conversational approach, it can be difficult to maintain that without some sort of structure. Even the quote-unquote unscripted podcasts often use an outline to keep things on track. An outline can help you to stay focused and on point. It doesn't have to be a full script unless you're doing a scripted podcast, obviously. But by having a rough guide of the topics you want to cover and the order in which you want to present it, it'll give your episode a sense of structure, and it'll make your episodes that much more enjoyable for your listeners. It'll also help you remember the important information that you want your listeners to know, like your intros, your outros, your call to actions, your guest intros, all that good stuff. For example, you might have an outline that looks like this: your intro, segments, your ad breaks if you have any, and your conclusion. Listeners love consistency, and knowing what your show is going to bring to the table every episode will give your audience something to look forward to. Also, try to set some time parameters for your segments. You don't have to stick to this down to the second, but timekeeping will help to keep you on track. You don't need to go on for 2 hours when you can get everything done in a tight 45 minutes. It's also a good idea to have a general content calendar to plan out your episodes in advance so you can keep your podcast consistent and organized. By planning your content in this way, you can ensure that your episodes are engaging and informative. Now that you've started to plan and outline your content, how long should your episodes be? Well, that depends. I know that's not a great answer, but that's really what it boils down to. Think about how much time you can realistically commit to the production process. Will you be able to plan, research, record, edit, and distribute your podcast in a timely, consistent manner? Do you want this to be a daily podcast, a weekly podcast, or even something that releases every 2 weeks? With that said, I'd target for 30 minutes or less in the beginning, especially if you don't have that much experience with editing. When we first started They Reminisce Over You, we weren't as strict with the timing and ended up with the first episodes being over 2 hours long, and the editing process was stressful, especially being a beginner. While a lot of the software that we're going to discuss in a later video can be easier to use once you get used to it, there can be a steep learning curve if you're someone who isn't necessarily tech savvy. Once you get a little more comfortable and you get into a workflow that works for you, then you can look at lengthening your episodes. But don't do it just for the sake of doing it. If you can get out what you need to say in 15 minutes, then you have a 15-minute show. Just be sure to focus on quality over quantity and only extend your episodes if it makes sense for your show. If you find that you have a lot of content that doesn't need much editing like an interview, then you can consider releasing longer episodes as long as it fits into your production schedule. Be sure to consider your release schedule and how often you want to put out new episodes. It's also important to consider the content of your show and whether it's time sensitive. If your podcast is a recap that covers a TV show airing on Sunday nights or a recap of current events, it might make sense to release your episodes around those specific times. On the other hand, if your show isn't time sensitive, then you have more flexibility in terms of when you want to release your episodes. Hey, there's no one-size-fits-all answer for this because the best day to release your podcast will depend on your specific goals and your audience. Here are a few things to think about when deciding on a release day for your show. Your production schedule. Choose a release day that works with your schedule and allows enough time for you to plan, research, record, edit, and distribute your episodes. Think about your target audience. When do your listeners have time to listen to your show? For example, if your target audience is working professionals, they might have more time to listen to podcasts on the weekends or during their commute to and from work. Experiment with different release days. Try releasing your episodes on different days and see how your listeners respond. You can use analytics to track your download numbers and see which days are more popular for your show. When we first started, we released our episodes on Tuesday mornings. After a while, we noticed that our biggest days in terms of downloads were actually Thursday through Sunday. So we switched to a Friday release date, and that's been working for us. In the end, the best day to release your podcast is the one that works best for you and your audience. So don't be afraid to experiment and see what works best. Now that you've started to shape out your show, you need to decide on the roles that people will play. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, teamwork makes the dream work. It's a little bit corny, but it's true. Having a good team in place with everyone having defined roles will make the job of getting this show out to the people much easier. Some of the things that you'll need to think about are, who will be hosting the show? Who will be editing the show? Who will be producing the show? Will this be an in-person podcast or will each member record remotely? This will be important if everybody isn't in the same room. Let's go into what these individual roles are. Host. The host is the voice of the show, so they need to be charismatic. They also need to be comfortable talking for long periods of time, and that's harder than it sounds. The host is also the face of the show, and it goes without saying that whoever the host is, they need to be expressive, articulate, and enjoy connecting with others. Writer. A podcast is all about speaking, so why would any writing need to be involved? Well, it turns out writing is actually a pretty important skill for making a podcast. Even if you don't want a full script for each episode, having an outline can be a useful way to make sure you stay on track while you're recording. Editor. Editors transform raw recordings into polished episodes, creating a cohesive narrative throughout, stitching all the different parts of your podcast together. They'll take the separate recordings of the intro, your segments, the ad breaks, and outros into one coherent episode. They're also responsible for improving audio quality, removing mic bleed and little noises in the background, taking out the ums and ahs, basically cleaning up all the little mistakes that you'll hear in a recording. That takes a careful ear. Producer. The producer is in charge of the show as a whole. They oversee the production process and make sure that the show is being executed according to their vision. They also make sure that the other team members are on track and they're all on the same page, so the episodes are always released on schedule. Your producer has to be comfortable taking on a leadership role and being the one who has to make the tough decisions. They should be organized, focused, and good at communicating with others. If you're currently running a one-person operation, you are the team unless you decide to outsource some of this work. But if you're a show with 2 or more people, then it's best to take a divide and conquer approach when it comes to getting this work done. Now that the back of the house stuff has been done, let's look at a few ways that you can save money in the early stages of your production. I don't know about you, but I love a great deal, and there's tons of them out there for you to take advantage of. You can get free and discounted podcast hosting at places like Buzzsprout and Spotify for podcasters. You can use design platforms like Canva and Adobe to create your artwork and branding. You can also use DAWs like Audacity, GarageBand, and Adobe Audition to record your episodes. Using free trials can be a good way to try out different options before committing to a purchase. This can be especially useful if you're just starting out and you're not sure which editing software will work best for you. This way, you get to try before you buy. Free trials typically allow you to use all of the features for a limited time, usually a few weeks. But it will give you the opportunity to get a feel for the product and to see how it works for you. If you try out a few different options and find that one software is much easier to use or has features that are a great fit for your workflow, then you'll be better equipped to decide where to spend your money. That said, let's take a look at a few recording software options. Let's talk about DAWs, which stands for Digital Audio Workstation. It's software that's used for recording, editing, and mixing audio files. They allow you to record multiple tracks at once, so if you're recording with more than one person, this is the way to go. There are several DAW options that offer free trials. Here's a few of them. Audacity is open source editing software that's available for free with no trial period. However, it's more of a basic option than the other DAWs, so it may not have all of the features that you're looking for, but for a beginner, it's still a great choice. GarageBand is audio editing software that's available for free on Mac computers with no trial period, but like Audacity, it's more of a basic option. Hindenburg is specifically designed for journalists and podcasters, and they do offer a free trial version that includes all of the features of the full version, but it expires after 30 days. Adobe Audition is a professional level DAW, but it has a free trial available for download. Trial version includes all of the features of the full version, but it's only for 7 days. Logic Pro is another professional level DAW that's available for Macs. It can be quite pricey, but you can get a 90-day trial to test out all of the features. If you plan to record remotely with team members in different places, these are some good choices. Not only can you record audio and video remotely, you can live stream and with some of them, use text-based editing as well. Squadcast is a platform by Descript that allows you to record high-quality audio remotely, multiple people, even if they're located in different places. You can get up to 1 hour recording time per month on their free tier. Riverside FM is another platform specifically designed for remote podcast recording, and it offers features like automatic transcription, the ability to edit both audio and video tracks, and allows up to 2 hours of multi-track recording. Ecamm Live allows you to live stream and record with multiple people remotely, and includes a wide range of tools for editing and producing. You can try their standard and pro plans free for 14 days. Zoom is a video conferencing platform that includes audio recording capabilities and can be used for remote podcast recording, although you're limited to 40 minutes per session on the free tier. In order to share your show with the world, you're going to need to use a podcast hosting service. Hosting services are places where you'll upload your audio files, generate an RSS feed for these files, distribute those files, and provide a place where an audience can listen to your show. So right now you're probably saying, Miguel, what's an RSS feed? Well, an RSS feed is a file that contains a list of updates to a podcast, including new episodes as they are published, information about each episode like the title and description, and a link to the audio file. This information is what's used to distribute your podcast to listeners and make it available through podcast platforms and apps. Basically, it's where all the information about your podcast lives. The hosting service will generate an RSS feed for your podcast based on this information and make it available for distribution. This is when you can start to submit it to podcasting platforms and directories to make it more widely available. We'll discuss distribution in a later video. Some hosting services offer additional features outside of your RSS feed, like analytics, ad integration, and even a free website for your podcast. There's many options for podcast hosting, both free and paid. Just keep in mind that the free options come with limitations. If you're looking for a free hosting option, here's a couple for you to try. Spotify for Podcasters. Spotify for Podcasters, formerly known as Anchor, offers a free plan with unlimited storage and the ability to distribute to all the major podcast platforms. It also offers a variety of paid plans with additional features such as advanced analytics, automatic transcription, and custom branding. Buzzsprout offers a free trial of its paid plans, which include unlimited storage, advanced analytics, and the ability to distribute to all the major podcast platforms. You can upload 2 hours of audio per month for free, but they'll only host each episode for 90 days before it's deleted. Spreaker from iHeart offers a free plan with limited storage and the ability to distribute to a few of the podcast platforms. It also offers paid plans with additional features such as the analytics and the ability to distribute to all platforms. For art and design options, there are several sites that offer free trials and assets, including Canva and Adobe. Canva offers a free account, which includes access to templates, graphics, and AI design features. Adobe has a collection of design software, including Adobe Stock, Adobe Express, Photoshop, and Illustrator. It offers a free 7-day trial of its full suite of tools. In the early stages of your journey, using free trials will allow you to test and evaluate different tools and services before committing to a purchase. This way, you can get a feel for the features and capabilities of each option and make a solid decision about what fits your needs and budget. Now that we've gotten the admin and software stuff sorted out, let's talk about the equipment that you're going to need to get your show up and running. I'm sure the first question that you have is, how much is it going to cost me to start this podcast? Well, that depends on what you already have access to. For the next couple of videos, we're going to take a look at a minimal setup, a basic setup for recording a solo podcast or a group podcast, a mid-level option for solo or group podcasts, and finally, the money ain't a thing option. Keep in mind that these are not strict guidelines that you have to stick to, and you can definitely mix and match these options in the ways that work best for you. Let's get into what a minimal setup looks like. The easiest way to record your podcast is to use your smartphone or tablet. You can use any headphones with a microphone attachment, which most of us already have since phones and tablets come with a pair included. You can either record your podcast directly into your device to be edited later, or you can upload the file directly into a service like Spotify for Podcasters. While this is an option to get yourself up and running, keep in mind that by recording this way, the quality of the audio won't be as good and will definitely need a lot of cleanup and post-production. I think you could pull it off in the right recording environment, but remember, our goal for this is to produce the best audio possible. So let's move on to a basic setup. Assuming that you already have a decent computer and a pair of headphones, you can get away with just adding a USB microphone to your hardware setup if you're doing a solo podcast or one where you record with others online. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to assume that you already have a computer to work with. Let's get into what a basic setup for a solo or remote podcaster can look like. You'll need a computer, a USB microphone, headphones, microphone stand or boom arm, recording software, and a hosting service. You're going to need a computer to capture your audio and to communicate with others through a remote service if you're doing interviews or working with a team. Because you'll be recording by yourself, you can get away with using a USB microphone that plugs directly into your computer. That eliminates the need for additional equipment like an audio interface. This will make the recording process more convenient and cost-effective. Some options for USB microphones are the Samsung Q2U, Rode NTSB, Elgato Wave, Blue Yeti, and the Shure MV7. This setup is perfect if you're doing a solo podcast or recording with others remotely using a streaming service like Squadcast or Riverside. You won't have to worry about adding an audio interface or XLR microphones into the mix. You'll be good to go with this setup. But if you're recording in the same room with multiple people, your best option is to use an audio interface with XLR microphones, which we'll discuss in the next video. But if budget is an issue, then there's ways to do this using USB microphones, but it's not as simple as plugging in and pressing record like a solo setup. Because most computer sound cards aren't set up to recognize more than one USB microphone at a time, you're going to have to download some third-party software and change some settings on your computer to make this work, so I'd suggest avoiding that. Another option is to buy something like the Rode NT-USB Mini, which has its own free dedicated software, so there's no need to do any manual configurations to your computer. And it gives you the plug-and-play functionality while being able to connect up to 4 microphones. The downside is this only works with Rode products. While there are some USB microphones that allow you to record 2 people on one microphone from different angles, such as the Blue Yeti, everything will be recorded to the same audio track. When multiple people's audio is recorded onto the same track, trying to edit that will be a nightmare for you or whoever's been tasked with cleaning up the audio. We'll get deeper into this when we discuss editing, but it's best practice to use separate microphones for each person who's recording. And I know you're thinking, hey, this was supposed to be the budget option. Me and my friends were planning to record into the same mic so we can save some money. I get it, budgets are real, but in terms of post-production and the work that needs to be done when you finish recording, this will save you a lot of headache. One person, one mic. For your mic stand or boom options, honestly, it just depends on your preference in your specific recording environment. A boom arm allows for more flexibility in positioning with the microphone and can reduce the amount of noise from handling the microphone during recording. A desktop stand can be more stable but might not give you as much flexibility in positioning. If you're a handsy talker, there's a chance you might bump the microphone, bang your hands on the table, knock something over. A floor microphone stand is a happy medium. To be honest, all 3 options work well for your recording, so you should experiment and see which one works best for you. With that said, let's take a look at what an intermediate setup looks like. If you'll be recording in the same room with at least one other person, I recommend having a similar setup to the basic setup that we talked about in the last video, but with 2 differences. Let's take a look at what you'll need. Instead of using a USB mic and plugging directly into your computer, you're going to need an XLR microphone. And because you've added an XLR microphone into the mix, you're going to need an audio interface to run it through. An audio interface is a device that will allow you to use an XLR microphone, which you can't plug directly into your computer like a USB microphone. If you plan to record with other people in person, or if you just want to level up your setup, this is the way to do it. Here's what you'll need: a computer, an audio interface, an XLR microphone for each speaker, headphones for each speaker, microphone stand or boom arms for each speaker, recording software, editing software, and a hosting service. The 2 differences between this and our previous setup is we're adding an audio interface and or mixer and XLR microphones. As I mentioned in the last video, while you can use multiple USB microphones with one computer, I personally wouldn't recommend it. Using 2 or more USB microphones on the same computer can lead to issues with your recording since the computer may have difficulty keeping the audio streams in sync. This is where an audio interface or mixer comes in. Basically, you can look at the audio interface or mixer as the middleman, which will help you to gain quality sound. An audio interface is a tool that connects your microphone or other audio equipment to your computer. It takes the analog sound waves and converts them to a digital data file that your computer can understand. Basically, it's like a translator between the analog and the digital world, allowing you to record high-quality audio and tweak it with digital tools. Some audio interfaces come with extra features like preamps to boost the input signal, built-in equalization and compression to improve the sound quality, and multiple inputs and outputs to record multiple tracks at once. It's pretty much a must-have for anyone who wants to record, produce, or mix audio on a computer. The biggest perk of using a mixer is the instant control you get over your audio. You can quickly and easily adjust levels, EQ, and compression without having to mess with a bunch of software. No need to open up a control panel or navigate through effects menus. Just reach out and tweak your audio on the fly. That makes hardware mixers a great option for both podcasting and streaming. You can also choose to go with an all-in-one interface mixer combo like a Rodecaster Pro, Rodecaster Pro 2, Tascam Mixcast, or the Zoom Live Track. These also act like an audio interface, so you're getting two devices for the price of one. Using an all-in-one mixer will also give you the option to record without a computer, since you can record directly to the device's SD card. If you're going to be recording in the same room with multiple people, or if you just want to scale up your solo setup, these are some great options. Now, if cost isn't a concern, let's talk about what you can do to take your podcast to the next level when budget is not an issue. First thing you can do is get your hands on some high-end equipment for recording, like the Shure SM7B. Or you could get a digital recorder like the Zoom H6. And don't forget about a good computer and an audio interface like the Focusrite Scarlett 18i20. Or you can get yourself some pro headphones like the Beyerdynamic DT990 or the Sennheiser HD660S. When it comes to recording and editing your podcast, you have a few software options to choose from as well, such as Pro Tools, Logic Pro, or Adobe Audition. But if you really want to take things up a notch, you could just outsource your post-production to a podcast production company. These companies have access to top-of-the-line equipment and software, and they know exactly what they're doing. They can take care of all the technical stuff, so you can just focus on creating great content. Plus, a production company can offer additional services like transcription, show notes, and analytics. They can even help with networking and promotion to help you reach a wider audience. Overall, using a production company can help you to create a better podcast that reaches more people. So if you want to create a top-notch podcast that leaves a lasting impact, you investing in high-end equipment or hiring a production company are both great options. With the right tools and experts by your side, you'll be able to take your podcast to the next level and reach a larger audience. The place where you record your episodes is one of the most important variables of good sound quality. Many new podcasters make the mistake of recording in a poor environment, creating a lot of noise and reverb in their audio. So if you're serious about your show, you're going to need a decent recording space. So why is it important to have a quality recording space? Because good audio is very important to the success of your show. People don't invest their time in shows that don't sound very good. If your audio sucks, listeners won't stick around. You don't need to set up a state-of-the-art studio with thousands of dollars worth of equipment like we talked about in the last video. While there are some independent shows that have those setups, if you're just starting out your podcast, you don't need to go that far. Although spending a few bucks will go a long way to making your audio better. The first thing you want to do is to find the right space to record in. If you don't have the resources to build your own recording space from the ground up, and let's be honest, most of us don't, pretty much any room in your house will do. There are many successful podcasters who record in places like their closets or under a couple of blankets. These small spaces with lots of soft material are often perfect to get clear audio without echoing. The smaller the space, the less chance there is to get sound reflection. This works if you're a solo podcaster or if you can convince somebody to climb into a tight space with you. But you're going to need a little more room than that if you're recording with 2 or more people. You might say to yourself, hey, I have the perfect space. I'll just use my empty basement, garage, or spare bedroom. This is a great idea if you have the space, but an empty room isn't always the best place to record. Empty spaces create a lot of reverb and echo. The best places to record are usually full of soft sound dampening items, which is why a closet works. So if you do plan to use a spare room, make sure to fill it with lots of soft surfaces like rugs and carpets and curtains, couches, big chairs, things that'll absorb noise and help with sound reflection. If you can, try to avoid rooms with hard surfaces like wood or tile flooring and bare walls. Also, a lot of everyday sounds that you've gotten used to or don't notice will get picked up on the microphone. So make sure to close your windows and doors, turn off any appliances like fans, your heating or AC units, and put any pets and children into another room for a couple of hours. Turn off your phone notifications while you're recording. Try not to type on a keyboard or use a mouse. A squeaky chair, necklaces, bracelets. These are all ambient sounds that have a chance to end up in your recording, so it's best to try and eliminate those as best you can before you hit record. Once you've come up with a decent space to record in, then you can start the process of getting your content recorded. By this point, you should have tried your hand at the different DAWs and recording services that I mentioned in an earlier video. And now you're ready to record a trailer and a couple of episodes of your podcast. First off, having a trailer before launching gives you time to refine your workflow. It also allows you to test out your equipment, sound quality, and editing processes. That way you can make any necessary adjustments before you upload your first episode. Secondly, having a few episodes in the bag ensures that you have content ready to go when you launch. That way you can build momentum and create a buzz around your show. It gives potential subscribers a good first impression, and it gives you multiple chances to impress them at the very beginning. I'd recommend at least 2 episodes at launch. Also, as we'll get into later when we talk about distribution, you'll need to upload at least 1 episode to your hosting provider in order to get an RSS feed for your show, which we've spoken about in a previous video. If you're recording with more than one person, I recommend that you have your DAW set up to multi-track recording. This will allow you to capture audio from multiple sources and separate tracks, allowing for more flexibility when it comes to editing because you can clean up each track independently. If you're a solo podcaster or think you'll be making little to no edits, then you can get away with doing a single track recording. This will make your process quicker and easier to record, but you lose the flexibility and control over the final sound quality because it doesn't allow for individual edits to be made to the different audio sources. We'll get into this in the next video. Next, you're going to have to do a check to make sure that everything is connected correctly. You're going to also need to check the microphone and headphone levels to make sure that everything is in working order. If you'll be recording remotely, you should log into that service as well. After you've confirmed that all your components are connected and working, you've done all of your hardware and software checks, your episode outline and notes are all set, you've had a cup of tea to clear your throat, it's showtime. At this point, you should be ready to record a trailer and a couple of episodes. The first thing that you want to do is to record some test audio. This doesn't have to be perfect. You're just using this time to make sure that you're sounding good on the mic and that there's no technical issues. So go ahead and record about 30 seconds of yourself talking. And if you're working with others, capture their audio as well. Once you've done that, play it back to make sure that everything is good to go. Make any adjustments that you need to at this time, like microphone position, headphone volume, your speaking level, making sure that everybody can be heard clearly. If there are no issues, then you can start recording the trailer. Your trailer should be 1 to 2 minutes long. You're using this time to let the world know what your show is all about. It's no different than the trailers that you'll see at a movie theater or on TV. You want it to be compelling and to give your potential listeners a peek into what you're going to be bringing to them every episode, but you don't want to give it all away. I've added links in the description to a couple really good trailers that I think you should check out. Since you're already set up, this is a good time to record a couple of episodes as well. Don't worry about mistakes. If you're not streaming or doing this live, if you stumble on a point or just feel that something isn't working, it's okay. You can just re-record the line and edit out the one that you messed up on in post-production. Right now, you just want to get the content recorded. So embrace your mistakes. Everything is a learning experience at this point. It's okay if you feel nervous on the microphone or you hate the sound of your voice. A lot of people do. Over time, as you gain experience, recording gets easier and easier. So let's move on to editing. Most people don't enjoy editing their episodes. I know I don't, but it's a critical part of producing great sound. You'll need to adjust your volume levels, remove background noises, speaking mistakes, add in your intros and outros. So using DAWs should be a part of your podcast setup. In terms of software, there are a lot of audio editing options available, and they all function in pretty much the same way. What you'll need to decide is which one fits into your workflow the best and which one fits your budget. This is where what we discussed in a previous video will come in handy. You can use the free trials and cheaper options that I talked about before to get a feel for which of the different pieces of software work best for you. As you become more comfortable with whatever software you choose, then you can look into learning more advanced editing techniques. But for the purposes of this series, we're going to keep this as simple as possible so you can get your show out to the world. But let's just be real with each other here. Poor audio quality will cause you to lose listeners. No matter how good your content is, if your audience has a hard time listening, they won't stick around. For that reason, editing audio is one of the most important processes in podcasting. Unfortunately, it's probably the most challenging. Luckily, with some practice, you can make your life a lot easier and create great audio. So how much editing is really needed? Answer to this, like many other questions in this series, it depends. For my podcast, I edit for both length and sound quality. If we record an hour's worth of content and I know I want to keep the episode between 30 and 45 minutes, then I know that there's some editorial choices with the content that I need to make. So I listen to the recording, adding some markers and notes to the file. I'm listening for things that I think can be taken out of the final mix. Here's some things that you can do to edit for length. Remove sections that went on too long and didn't really add to the conversation. Remove any stumbles and mistakes. Shorten any long pauses. Basically, take out any unnecessary things that will help to condense the conversation. When I'm editing for sound quality, I'm looking for sounds and noises in the background that can be taken out, like typing on a keyboard, mouse clicks, banging on a table, mic bleed. I do that by making adjustments to the compression, the EQ, playing with the noise gate, stuff like that. These are intermediate to advanced techniques and things that you might not need to concern yourself with at this stage of your learning. Instead, I recommend that you create the best recording environment that you can. That means the quietest, most non-reflective sound space that you can find. That way, you can get the cleanest recording possible. Once you've gotten the basics down and a little more comfortable using your preferred software, then you can level up your post-production using different methods to make your audio sound even better. But if you're looking for more advanced techniques or you already have some previous editing experience, I've linked to some great resources in the description below. So you're ready to get your show out to the world. You've recorded your trailer and a couple episodes, and now it's time to watch those download numbers go up. Not so fast, my friend. Distributing your podcast means making it available wherever your listeners prefer to consume their podcasts. You're going to want your show to be available on as many podcast listening platforms and apps as possible. If you haven't already done so, this is when you're going to need to sign up with a hosting company. Publishing your podcast, it'll need to be uploaded to a hosting service first before you can distribute it. Your hosting company will create an RSS feed for your show so that it can be distributed on the various platforms. This is why you should have at minimum a trailer recorded and ready to upload, because you can't get an RSS feed until you've uploaded at least one episode. A trailer counts as one episode. Once you've uploaded your first piece of audio and gotten an RSS feed, now you can start to submit your show to the various podcasting platforms. You first have your RSS feed submitted to most of the major platforms like Spotify, Apple, or Amazon. It may take different times for them to approve your show for distribution. Some are as fast as 24 hours, others may take up to a week. So if you have a specific release date in mind, make sure to take care of this part well in advance. That's why you should plan to have at least a trailer uploaded around 2 weeks before you plan to release your first episode. Like I said, the amount of time that it takes for each platform varies, so you don't want to upload your first piece of audio December 31st and expect to have it available on New Year's Day. A turnaround that quickly is only possible after the initial setup on the various platforms. As a reminder from a previous video, your RSS feed is how the information about your show, such as the name, episode titles, show notes, gets to the various directories and listening apps. This is what allows your show to automatically be updated wherever you have it listed whenever you upload new episodes to your hosting service. That way you don't have to do it for all the individual podcast listening apps, because that would be a headache to do every single episode. For those of you who have a hosting company that doesn't automatically send your RSS feed to other podcast listening apps during your initial setup, There's a manual way to do it, but it's as easy as copying and pasting a link. It's not hard at all. Submitting your show to each platform may seem like a lot of work, but the good news is you only have to do it once. The process varies slightly on each platform, but they're all pretty straightforward. After that, the individual apps will monitor your RSS feed for new content and updates. Like I said earlier, your show is automatically updated whenever you release new episodes, so it'll only take a couple minutes for the major platforms like Apple or Spotify to update. The other services may take an hour or two to update, but it's still pretty quick. In order to get your show seen or heard as widely as possible, you should also publish new episodes as posts on your podcast website. Whether that's your own site with its own domain or the website which most hosting companies offer as part of their packages. For both accessibility and SEO purposes, you may want to add transcripts to your episodes as well. If you're doing an audio-only show, I'd recommend publishing your episodes to YouTube. I've linked to a video showing how to do that in the description below. Now that you've done all the heavy lifting, let's talk about how to let the world know that your show's ready to be heard. Once you've recorded and uploaded your trailer, you should start to promote your podcast to help build anticipation for it. Now, when you get to the point where you're actually releasing your show, you should be ready to crank it up a notch. Here are some ways for you to get the word out. Submit your podcast to as many directories as possible. While Apple Podcasts and Spotify are the largest in terms of reach, there are a lot of other platforms that your show should be on as well. Share episodes on social media and ask listeners to share with their own networks. Promoting a podcast can be a fun and exciting way to share your content with a wider audience. One of the most effective ways to promote a podcast is through social media. Share episodes on your personal and business social media accounts and ask listeners to share them with their own networks as well. This can help to increase visibility and bring in new listeners. Keep in mind that social media followers don't always translate into downloads. When you share your podcast on social media or through email, I would suggest using a smart link service to share links to your podcast. It makes it super convenient for your listeners to easily find and subscribe to your podcast on their preferred platform. For example, if you're only providing a link to your podcast on Spotify, people who don't already have Spotify for whatever reason probably won't make the effort to listen if something else is their preferred app. They may not even take the time to look for you on their preferred app. So you should make it as easy as possible for people to find you in places that they already are. Also, smart links give you some analytics so you can see how many people are clicking on their link and where they're coming from. This can help you to understand your audience better and optimize your promotion strategy. You can also use smart links to cross-promote other things such as merchandise, your website, or other resources related to your podcast. Another great way to promote your show is collaborate with other podcasters or brands to cross-promote each other's shows. Reach out to other podcasters and ask to have them as a guest on your show. You can also reach out to other podcasters and ask if you can be a guest on their show. This can help to expose your show to new listeners as well as build relationships with other podcasters. Feed swaps and promo swaps are great ways to promote your podcast by trading promos with another show. It's a great way to reach a new audience and to get more exposure. With feed swaps, you and another podcast agree to promote each other's episodes by either including a short promo like a trailer for the other podcast in your own episode, or by putting a full episode of their show into your feed. Essentially, you would upload an episode of their show on your feed, and they would do the same with your show on theirs. Promo swaps are similar, but instead of promoting each other's episodes, you agree to promote each other's shows by running a promo during your show. Both feed and promo swaps can be a great way to reach a new audience and be mutually beneficial for both podcasts. Just make sure to choose a podcast whose content aligns with yours and that you genuinely believe in before promoting it to your listeners. Attend podcast events and network with other podcasters and industry professionals. Networking is also a great way to promote a podcast. By attending podcasting events and meeting other podcasters, this can help to build connections and gain exposure for your show. Optimize your podcast website and episodes for search engines by including relevant keywords. SEO can also be used to promote a podcast by including relevant keywords in your show title, description, and tags. This can help to bring in new listeners through search engines. Run ads on platforms like Overcast, Podcast Addict, or Pocket Cast to reach a wider audience. The benefit of doing paid ads there is these are podcast player apps, so you already know that people are there for podcasts versus taking a risk with Google, Facebook, or Instagram, where the audience is a lot more vast. Reach out to your email subscribers and let them know about your latest episodes. If you already have an email list from another area at your disposal, email marketing is another way to promote your podcast. Reach out to your email subscribers and let them know about your latest venture if it's appropriate. Build an engaged community around your podcast. Community building is a great way to promote your podcast. And finally, keep your listeners engaged by providing value and encouraging them to spread the word about your show. These tips are a great starting point for you to use as a beginner. As you gain more experience, you'll learn which of these methods will work best for you and which ones won't. Congratulations, you made it to the end. I hope these tips and tricks will help to kickstart your journey to becoming a successful podcaster. Once you've gotten up and running, leave a comment and let everybody know where to find your show. Also, if you found this useful, subscribe to our channel and share it with a friend. Thank you for taking the time to watch this course, and happy podcasting.